Here's what is perhaps the most unusual clock in my collection, although that's somewhat debatable, of course. This one doesn't even really look like a clock. It looks like some sort of 1970s sci-fi device, but it's in fact a replica of the Berlin-Uhr clock, which was installed in 1975 in Berlin. This replica was produced starting in the late 1970s, I believe, and this is one of the earlier examples. Reading the time takes a little getting used to, and thankfully this one still has the sticker which tells you how to read the clock. It's missing off of most of them. Perhaps people thought it looked ugly. Each of the lights in the top row indicates 5 hours. 3 of them are lit, so that means 15 hours. The second row of red lights indicates individual hours, and 1 is lit, so that's 16 hours, also known as 4 o'clock. This row of orange and red lights indicates 5 minutes each. 3 of them are lit, so that means 15 minutes. Having a red one for every 15 minutes makes it a little easier to read. The bottom row of lights each indicates 1 minute, and now 1 of them is lit, so that's 4:16. As you can probably guess, this is just a blinking seconds indicator. This clock has been keeping good time for a while now. I'm impressed with how accurate a lot of these early clocks are. Like most early clocks, this one is synchronous to the AC line, and as long as the noise rejection is pretty good, that'll keep good time indefinitely. Well, until you lose power, that is. To set the time, you hold down this button here, and then press either the hours, minutes, or clear button. Holding down the time set button there stops the seconds, so you could use that to synchronize the clock. So when I press both the time set button and the hours button, you can see the hours goes up, and it just cleared out. So this would be 12:17. The minutes is set similarly. So you can set this clock pretty fast. Just have to be careful not to accidentally bump the 0 button when you're trying to set the time. This is a 0 button right there next to the minutes. That clears everything out. So you have to put the time back now. It has 2 alarms, which seems excessive, considering this thing isn't really an ideal alarm clock by any means. It's a little tricky to read first thing in the morning, plus the beep is pretty annoying. Setting the alarm time is similar to setting the clock time. You just hold down one of the alarm buttons you want to set, and then set it to whatever you want to set it to. I'm going to zero out the time there just to make my life easier. So the alarm is set for 3 o'clock. We'll make it 3:01. When I press the alarm button, a little red sliver lit up here in the seconds indicator. That's how you can tell the alarm is on. When you press the other alarm button, the other sliver lights up, and pressing these buttons cancels the alarm. So we'll turn alarm 1 back on. You can see it retained the time that I set it to. Now I'm going to set the clock to 3 o'clock, and I'll wait for the alarm to go off. You'll hear what I mean about how annoying that beep is. And there it is. Just a continuous, droning, high-pitched noise. I would hate to wake up to that, so I have not been using this thing as an alarm clock. Let's put a stop to that. Here's a little sticker on the back of the clock. You can see it's serial number 10,617. It was made in Germany by Dieter Binninger. Like it says, parentheses, Berlin West. The base of the clock was unfortunately broken when I got it. I repaired it with crazy glue, which reacted very vigorously with this plastic. I was surprised at how much it melted it, so be aware of that. I don't think this clock was ever sold in the US, so whoever bought this thing brought it back. I replaced the power cord with a US one, and the jumpers are switched over for 110 volts and 60 hertz. I was very happy to find that it was jumper selectable for both of those. I might have been out of luck otherwise, well, barring getting like a frequency converter, which is, you know, kind of a pain. This little knob on the bottom here adjusts the brightness. I got it set at a pretty good spot right now, but I'll tweak it around just so you can see. So it can go dimmer than that, it can go a little bit brighter, but turning up past where I had it really doesn't seem to improve the brightness much. It just cranks the current up. Now this clock had several problems with it when I got it, and that may be a common thing. The voltage regulator in here was burned out, and honestly that was a design flaw on their part. There was no heatsink at all on the voltage regulator, so that thing just cooked. It cooked the board and cooked itself. I had to trim away a little bit of plastic on the inside of the case. There were some unused plastic posts to fit a heatsink in there, but I've got a clip-on heatsink on my replacement voltage regulator, and I changed out the capacitors. They were dried out from the heat. The transformer also runs kind of on the hot side in there. This case is just small for the electronics that are in there. As much as I hate to take this thing apart again, I'm going to do so. To do that, you take out the 4 screws in the 4 corners there, and that one there as well. That's a smaller size screw, be aware of that. So I took out those screws, and here's the little one there that was right under the post for the display. And here's the inside of the clock. Now the power supply board is connected to the other board with this ribbon cable, and you'll notice that there's one unused position in that connector there, and that goes to the empty space at the back of the clock. So remember to put that thing in correctly, otherwise you will probably break something. I just separated the power supply portion from the clock chip and driver portion. You can see that heatsink I squeezed in there. It just barely fits. It's a pretty tight squeeze. The capacitor I used is a little bit larger and higher voltage rated than the original, so I kind of relocated it, but that puts it away from the voltage regulator there a little bit. These little delicate wires there go to the beeper. Here you can see the 220 volt, 110 volt selector. You have to move that jumper over if you want 220 volts. All the electronics are run by this TMS 1000 NL0011. The TMS 1000 is a early 4-bit microcontroller. You can see it's dated 8028, so the 28th week of 1980. These chips were apparently custom mask programmed for use in this clock here. These 2 chips here are LED drivers. This one here is dated 8240, so if that's a date code like the other ones, then this clock was likely made in 1982. They probably had to buy a big batch of these clock chips, so it's probably the oldest part in here. You probably noticed in the video that it looked like the display was flickering. It doesn't flicker to the naked eye, but it does flicker when recorded by the camera because of the speed of the shutter. The display is multiplexed. Although not all the LEDs are multiplexed, the alarm indicators are driven directly by the processor, and the seconds indicator here is driven by an individual transistor, if I'm remembering right. Yeah, there it is. That little transistor in the corner there drives the seconds indicator. The grid underneath is driven by these 2 chips though. There's just more LEDs than there are output pins on that processor, so they had to do that. I just undid the 4 screws on the back. You can see they're quite a bit longer than the screws on the bottom, and pulled off the faceplate. So there's all the LEDs that go into this thing. You can see most of them have a somewhat unusual package design that you don't really see anymore, although the 2 alarm indicator LEDs are a standard, I believe that's a 3mm LED. These were fairly high brightness types for the 1970s and early 80s. Not sure what the stamp K is for, but it's on both boards. And that's also connected with a ribbon cable there. I'm going to put this thing back together now. Hopefully it still works. Well, the clock is back together and I plugged it back in. When you first plug this thing in, or if it loses power, It'll flash all the lights like that until you set the time. I remembered in time that I have the original styrofoam insert for the box of this clock. It's not the first time that I've got only the styrofoam part and not the actual outer box. Why people throw out the outer box and keep the styrofoam part is beyond me. In this little bag here is all the original parts I took out. Here's that original German power cord. The burned up voltage regulator. A LM317 adjustable voltage regulator. A 100 microfarad cap. Big 1000 microfarad cap. This is the only one that showed signs of leaking. You can see a little bit there around the terminal there. This one was getting cooked by that voltage regulator. And this was around the power cord in there. You can see the cord has bits of styrofoam melted onto it. It's an annoying chemical reaction between vinyl and some other kinds of plastic, such as styrofoam. You can see all the melt marks from that cord there. Thankfully, unlike the other example of this clock that the person who sold me this had, this one did not have the cord wrapped around the clock itself, so it doesn't have all the melt damage that one did. That's all there is to show with this thing, so thanks for watching.